morning, everyone. Thought we would go ahead and get started with this morning's program, so please feel free, if you haven't had a chance to get your breakfast yet, to go up and still get breakfast. They'll continue to serve until 7:30, and of course coffee and water available over on the side of the room as well. But we want to get the program rolling this morning because we have some amazing dynamic speakers for you to be able to listen to this morning as we move economic development forward in 2024 here in the Western Treasure Valley. As the Boise Valley likes to call it, I call it the Treasure Valley here. We are not the Western Treasure Valley, we're the original Treasure Valley. So thank you. We also would like to recognize a few key people that helped put this entire program together this morning. And I am going to start with our Executive Director of SREDA, Ms. Kristen Mullins. Thank you very much, Kristen, for all of your hard work. And the team that put it all together, working with Kristen as well, too, of course. Our in-kind sponsors did all of our printing and all of the materials that you see on the tables. Please make sure that you take advantage of those and follow along on the agenda. Take those things with you. The thing that I really want you to take with you is the pamphlet from SREDA that asks you to pledge money to SREDA to keep us up and running and organized. So please make sure, actually, even better than taking it with you, fill it out, write out the check, let me know, and I'll come by and get it from you before you leave. But to the Biz Zone for doing all of our printing work, thank you very much, Kim. Weezer Classic Candy for supporting and providing some of the gift baskets that you see up here for drawings this morning. I can't imagine, that guy's so busy, I can't imagine he had time to do that, but thanks to whoever he is and wherever he is. Also, we would like our partners that help sponsor the entire event this morning, if you could stand as when I read all four of you off to be recognized, I would appreciate it. Cascade Natural Gas, Idaho Power, Farmers Mutual Telephone Company, and D.L. Evans Bank. And then our top sponsors this morning, the ones who wrote a nice big check to put everything on and gave us the room and all of those other kind of things. We would like to recognize Nick Writing from the Energy Trust of Oregon. Nick? And Kristen has a mic for you, Nick, for you to say a couple of words if you would.
I'd just like to thank everybody for having us out here and to run this event together. My name is Nick Ridling. I work with the Energy Trust of Oregon. We have rebates and incentives for anybody that works with public utilities, Cascade Natural Gas, Northwest Natural, Pacific Power, Northwest, Vista, and, oh wow, it's based here, not OTEC. Nope, OTEC's not I think it's based there. Sorry, early for me. But yeah, thanks everybody for coming out. If you have any sort of future expansion that falls under one of the public utilities, I'm sure we can help facilitate those buildings being built or efficiencies in currently operating systems. Please feel free to come out to me. I'm better on the spot with one-on-one than you can do with large group of people. Engineer trades, so I'd like to be at my desk or talking about specific systems. Please come talk to me about that. I promise I'll live a lot better. Thank you. Have a good morning.
Next is our friends from the Eastern Oregon Border Board, Ms. Dana Young.
Well, thank you and good morning. It is my pleasure, I'm walking back here because the group is mostly back here, that Eastern Oregon Board members, that's always a mouthful, board members, are here with us this morning. There are 7 voting members and 1 non-voting member. And I just wanted to introduce those to you. So Andrew Maeda, Nikki Shira, Montessa Young, Taylor Rimbowski, Ron Heidel, Sherry Hung, and me. So thank you for welcoming them this morning. This is a great team that we've been working together for some time, and I really appreciate them. Now, this morning, our executive director, Shauna Peterson, was not able to be with us because she is attending an event for her children where she should be. And so I just wanted to give a shout out to Shauna. She's the glue that holds it all together for us, and we think she's pretty amazing. So, Shauna Peterson. So the Eastern Oregon Border Economic Development Board was created and is charged with implementing investment strategies and practices in workforce and economic development in the region. So it's our responsibility to make grants and loans. All grant and loan awards must significantly impact education, workforce, and economic development in the Border Board region. To date, the Border Board has, this is pretty amazing. So to date, the Border Board has distributed over $4.3 million in grant awards to more than 70 recipients in the Border Board region, and we're pretty proud of that. So very quickly, we have 3 grants that are open now. I would encourage you to pick up our brochures that are out on the table. Check us out on the website, www.easternborderboard.org, and that's printed on the material as well. And those 3 grants that are open right now are open until March 31st. And the 3, I'll just list them off. The Scott Fairley Memorial Edge Grant, that's a $25,000 grant for businesses that are doing innovative things or startups to help supercharge the economy here. Education and workforce training grants that is available to local education service providers in the border region for up to $100,000. And also community improvement planning grants for local governments within the border region, and they can apply for up to $100,000 for community improvement planning, including master plans, transportation plans, airports, parks, and more. So please check us out and apply for some money. So thank you again for giving us a few minutes this morning.
Thank you, Dana. And speaking of dynamic women, seems how you already have the microphone, our next sponsor was Treasure Valley Community College and the foundation, Miss Dana Young.
Well, good morning, everyone. It's so great to be here. And again, it's my pleasure to be here. I wanted to introduce our board members. A few of them are here this morning with us. So our board chair, Ken Hart. And board members Tori Ramirez and Dr. Lindsay Nauman. Thank you for being here. Also, I have a table full of TVCC dignitaries here, some vice presidents. So I'll start with Vice President of Student Services, Travis McPetridge. Vice President of Academic Affairs, Sandy Porter. Vice President of Administrative Services, Darren. And we also have our Dean of Career and Technical Education, Dr. Ben Merrill. And our Executive Director of the Foundation and Development, and that is Kathy Yasuda. All right, so economic development plays a crucial role for TVCC and for everything that we do in this community. We really feel like we are the economic engine for training workforce to come out and talk to all of you, partner with business and industry to find out what you need for your employees, and then to provide that training so that we can have a skilled workforce here. One of our main goals is to try to keep students when they graduate in the region. So that's a real focus of ours, to train them and keep them here. So anything you all can do to help us with that, I know it's a goal of yours too. And we know that TVCC draws people to the region, right? Because you have a community college, there's a place for people to get trained, it draws business and industry in, and it also draws students in. in order to have a place where they can upskill, if you will. We partner again with business and industry, K-12 and universities, and we also partner with our municipalities and our social service agencies. So we have great partnerships that span the entire region. And we're just super proud to be able to serve everyone and to be a part of this community and to be able to connect with all of you in this room and across the region. So thank you.
Next sponsor we'd like to hear from is our friends at D. Evans Bank, Rob Fry.
Good morning. Thank you for being here. We're excited at D.L. Evans Bank this year. We're celebrating our 120-year anniversary. We were established in Idaho in 1904, and I manage the Fruitland branch. We have 14 employees that are housed there. We work hard on high-touch customer service, and just invite you to come over, check us out, and you don't need an appointment to do that. Thank you.
Rob, I was sure you were going to announce the opening of the Weiser branch while you were here this morning. Anyway, also, we'd like to hear from our sponsors at Weiser Memorial Hospital, Steve Hale.
All right, well, good morning, and my thanks also to all of you for showing up. Now, the mission of Weiser Memorial Hospital is to save lives, improve health, and build community. And I see that's what everybody in this group is really all about. Some of you all bring in the new industry, doing things here, help to build, bring people in that help us to have patients, along with a few other places. But just a couple of notes on some of the things we're doing there in terms of trying to fulfill our mission. We have gotten the largest bore, or the widest bore. It's not quite an open MRI, but it is the largest one in the state now. So for anybody that has patients that might be a little claustrophobic or a little bit larger, we can accommodate them. We've been getting patients from as far away as Idaho Falls, LaGrange, and a few other places. Montana, I heard somebody was coming down from. So we have those kind of facilities. We do have a full-time orthopedic surgeon on staff and a general surgeon now. So all those things that people keep saying, we didn't know Weiser did that. We do that. And come the end of March, we're going to be one of only 2 facilities in this region in the Treasure Valley, I guess the western
Treasure Valley.
That deliver babies, with Caldwell, West Valley closing down their labor delivery deck. It's just us and St. Alphonsus now delivering babies in this area. So don't forget us if you're looking for an alternative place to do that too. So that's it. Thanks.
We would also like to recognize our partners here with TBCC Small Business Development Center, instrumental in organizing and putting this entire program together this morning. Tom Villapando, the new SBDC Director, and Jimsy Crouch. Thank you very much for your hard work. And congratulations, Tom, on the new appointment as well. And our friends at the Ontario Chamber of Commerce as well. Unfortunately, John is... John was the one that helped us secure the location, and thanks for the help from TBCC for the location as well. Picked the date and then conveniently arranged to be in a training on the other side of the state this morning so that he couldn't be here. So, but thank you to John for all of his hard work as well too. And also, we have these drawings for these gift baskets are going to take place at the end. If you have your business cards with you, we have a bowl to drop your business cards in case you missed that. We have a young lady that is here with us this morning representing the state FBLA program. We're very honored and fortunate to have the state vice president, Campbell, here with us this morning. So she's going to help us with the drawing later on. And I should say she's currently the state vice president, but she's running for a state office next month as well. So hopefully she's going to come back with the state president title to represent our area, and then on to a national title as well, right? So, but we're going to send her around with the bowl too, so just in case you didn't get an opportunity to drop that business card in, we'll do that before we draw as well, okay? Without any further ado, I'd like to introduce our first guest speaker, Kate Harbour. Kate comes to us as the Interim Deputy Director of the Eastern Oregon Visitor Center Association. Please welcome Miss Kate Harbour. Thank you.
Switch out my power. I have people to help me switch out the PowerPoint. So. Great. With that taken care of. My name again is Kate Harbour with the Eastern Oregon Visitors Association. And I'm based in La Grande, but we do serve the 11 counties and 2 federally recognized tribes of Eastern Oregon. And I have to say I appreciate someone else messing up names this morning because I'm used to Pacific time and that hour difference is like really real at 6:30 in the morning, I'm realizing. So, but I'm really happy to be here and appreciate the invitation. And so today I'll be sharing a little bit about the connection between tourism and economic vitality, and a little bit of the work that we've been doing here locally in Malheur County. And one of the reasons I like being part of these events is because tourism is part of the economic development mix in rural communities, but it's often a balancing act of how to make that work in harmony with just the people who live here and the environment. And so a big part of that for us is just, being physically present throughout the region. We also do marketing and experience development. And I do like to start, just when I talk about our work and the economic impact of tourism, I like to start off with just kind of this overview of what is the tourism landscape in Oregon and like what infrastructure is there to help like plan and manage for it. And so up at the statewide level, we have Travel Oregon, which splits the state out into 7 regions, of which Eastern Oregon is this very large gold one, and that's the level that I work at. And while the regions are pretty standardized, at the local level, that's where it gets kind of interesting and a lot less standardized. And so we'll find ourselves working with all kinds of organizations. Chambers of commerce are really common. We work with John, who, conveniently wasn't here today. We work with municipalities a lot, economic development districts, and then a few communities do have their own designated local tourism organizations. So I share this just to say that tourism is kind of a sort of slippery sector. It touches a lot of things. It's like part economic development, part community development, part recreation, but it encompasses a lot of shared values that we have. And so we're going to take a quick look at just what's going on in Malheur County. What's the economic snapshot? And so I do acknowledge that we've got some friends from Idaho here today, but my focus is on Oregon. And so even though these numbers are Oregon focused, we recognize that visitors don't see like county and state borders. So we're always open to those partnerships. And so this slide here, you can see this captures the overnight visitor volume in Malheur County. And so you can see it's over the past 12 years, and you can see that dip during COVID, and then in the past few years, you all have seen quite an uptick actually in your overnight stays. And I don't know if this might be because maybe you just have more hotels, and so there's more places for people to stay. And so how that then translates to economic impact, one of the first places that we look in the industry to just see kind of that barometer is that just local tax receipts on those overnight stays. So every time someone books a hotel stay, there are taxes added on. There's a 1.5% statewide tax, and then there's usually also a local tax that will vary by municipality. And so I believe Malheur County itself doesn't have one, but the City of Ontario does have a 9% tax on those lodging fees that can be split between just tourism, marketing, promotions, and then just your general fund. So some of these tax receipts can be used for just roads, parks, really, whatever the community sees fit. But this is really just part of the picture. And so if, people coming here aren't just they're not just sleeping, they're doing other things too. So while accommodations are kind of the biggest bulk of visitor spending in your community, food service, arts, other retail services, gas, like when you take all of those things into account, the economic impact is much larger. And that larger realm is really where the bulk of our work happens. And we use something called the 3-3 sleep approach to understand how to capture that economic impact from visitors. And basically what this boils down to is that for every day that a visitor spends in your community, there's 7 opportunities to capture those outside dollars. Everyone's looking for 3 meals usually. They're looking for 3 activities and 1 place to sleep. So these are all areas that EOVA works with local partners to kind of turn the dial and see how we might be able to capture more visitor dollars. And one of the main ways that we do that is just through, apart from marketing, is through like place-based experience development. So this means, we're not really trying to develop like kind of random new things. We want to really build upon each community's individual strengths and uniqueness, because we think, things that community loves make really good visitor experiences too. And we think it's, a win-win when those 2 things can reinforce each other. So recently, we've been able to partner with some people here in the room, hi Tom, and as well as John with the Ontario Area Chamber, to do some of that experience development. So last fall, or about a year ago, the Ontario Area Chamber of Commerce was awarded a grant from Travel Oregon to do some local tourism planning. And really just a big part of this was getting folks back together. I think after COVID, some of our networks have definitely become a little more thin. And so we held workshops in Nissa, Vail, and Ontario to kind of better understand just like where's the momentum right now, where are people excited, and like what new visitor experiences might we be interested in developing together. And so it was great to be able to see kind of the nuance between those communities and then just find the common threads that we could really put our weight behind. And so that group, they met in the fall through those 3 community meetings, and then we've also done some research and a tourism assessment and some stakeholder interviews, which have been brought together in like a nice summary report. And then we were lucky to be able to meet just last week to really focus in on some project concepts that those local partners want to move forward. And these are kind of the 4 areas that we zeroed in on. There's a lot of interest in outdoor recreation infrastructure, maybe particularly about cycling development in the near term. We recognize that a lot of folks are coming over here, but maybe not staying or staying long enough. We also are really interested in the development of and connection of cultural and heritage assets throughout the community. You all have a really rich history and just like so many stories to share, and visitors will really want to connect with that. So excited to see that one on the list. And then dark skies tourism. We can take for granted the night skies out in Eastern Oregon, but this is actually a kind of a novelty to some people. And in the tourism industry, we really like this project because it usually does guarantee an overnight stay. If you're going to see the stars, you're probably going to want to sleep somewhere after that. And then finally, there's interest in moving forward with some culinary and agritourism work, both because of the rich agricultural history here, but also because most people just love to eat, and so it's an easy connection point with visitors. So those projects have just been selected, and local leads have really raised their hand to say, yes, I want to spearhead this and move this forward. And so they're going to be looking for your partnership and support. And so if you're interested in being involved or just learning more, I invite you to reach out to me, and I can sort of direct you to the right person. And I've also put John Breidenbach on here if you want a more local connection or someone's office who you can easily walk into. So that's all I have to share today, and thank you again for having me.
Thank you, Kate, very much. I think all of us had a chance to do some dark sky tourism this morning on the way in as we were blown into the meeting this morning. So thank you very much for sharing that. We appreciate that. Next, I'd like to, and I just left my cheat sheet sitting down there. Hold on. I got one right there. There we go. Damon Runberg, our state economist from Business Oregon. Thank you, Damon.
I'll let you do the slides while I talk for a minute. Is it okay if I walk with this for a second? Hey there. Good morning. Good to see you all. I'm also from Pacific Time. I live over in Bend, so I'm not all the way in the evil empire of Salem or the Willamette Valley. There's us Central Oregonians have an allegiance with the Eastern Oregonians. We both see sagebrush, and when it rains, we celebrate. So, there's some kindred spirits there. You get to hear from two economists today. You get to hear one from Oregon, you get to hear one from Idaho. It's not a competition, okay? Some things might look a little bit better on the Idaho side. We celebrate that. They're our friends, they're our neighbors. We all it's the Pacific Northwest. We're a team, right? So whatever Craig says later, just know that I said we were a team, okay? Those ones aren't mine. It's okay.
You're doing my presentation.
It's okay. Mine looks...
That's called teamwork.
She said it was on the thumb drive. It's okay. While they do that, I have my presentation in my brain anyway. So what's really interesting, I want to have a broader conversation. Don't look up at the slides behind me. I know they're massive and there's a lot going on there. Look at me. Look at my eyes. Look at my eyes. We, as Oregonians, as Idahoans, have been pretty pessimistic about how the economy looks. And we have some friends over in the Portland area that are a research group called DHM Research. And that organization does just public polling. And they ask folks all around the state, and this is Oregon-specific data, sort of how their perceptions are, how they're feeling about things. And one of the things they ask on a routine basis, every month, they send out this stratified random sample that goes to Oregonians all across the state, making sure to not just represent Portland, is sort of like, how is the economy doing? How do you think it's doing? And what's really fascinating is I would show you the percentage, but I don't have it in front of me. But I remembered it, which is roughly 43% of, no, it was higher than that for the state. Around 50% of Oregonians say that the state's economy today is poor or very poor. Today. When I say today, that was as of December. That's the most recent results. But December was just yesterday, right? So whatever. That's a really high percentage. Half of Oregonians think that the economy in the state is poor or very poor. And let's put that into context a little bit. When we go backwards and look at the survey results from, say, June of 2020. Does anyone remember the month June of 2020? It was a weird time, right? A lot of uncertainty. June of 2020 was like the heart of pandemic lockdown, uncertainty, weirdness. The highest unemployment rate Oregon had ever seen was in June of 2020. I mean, this is a pretty gloomy, weather-wise, it would have probably been pretty nice, but a really gloomy period for the economy. And yet the share of Oregonians who thought that the economy was poor back then is the same as it is today. Highest rate of unemployment. Just got to put that in there. So we fast forward and we go to asking the question at the personal level. They ask, okay, Oregonians, you think the state economy is really poor, or at least half of you do. What do you think about your own personal financial situation? And when asked about their own financial situation, roughly 43% of us say that our personal financial situation is poor, very poor. Now that's better than what we think of the state economy, which is a little bit interesting, by the way, that there's this split here between how we think of the big bad, economy, which is an ambiguous thing, versus how we feel about ourselves. Because at the end of the day, the economy is just us, right? All of us aggregated together is the economy, us buying and selling goods and services and all that stuff. So how we feel about ourselves should be a reflection of how we feel about the state or national economy, but it's not that way. We are very pessimistic about big things and very optimistic about the individual level. But even then, 43% say that their personal financial situation is poor or very poor. Okay, so go back again to June of 2020, 48% of Oregonians thought their personal financial situation was poor or very poor in the midst of record high unemployment. So we are pretty pessimistic right now. We do not think that the economy is good at the state level. We do not feel particularly good about our own personal financial situation. And I'm going to just roll with no slides. It's okay, because you know what? I give talks every week, and it just locked in there. So look at that. Keep looking at me. Keep looking at me. That's not exciting. It's just a screensaver. If we go to the national level, there's similar research that's been done that asks sort of similar questions about, how do you feel Americans about what's going on in the economy? There we go. There's some sexy pictures that we're going to show. So, I want you to see those. It looks like it doesn't work, but it's okay. Because, we'll roll. Okay, so we asked the same thing of Americans more broadly, but this is sort of the reverse question here. We're asking instead here, how many of you all think that the economy is good or excellent? So this is the opposite of poor, very poor, right? And what's fascinating is these responses from research done by the U.S. Federal Reserve. It's not nearly as recent, right? It ends in 2022, but you can see the general trend of people's perceptions, which is the share of Americans who think the national economy, orange line, is good or very good, has been declining really rapidly, and there's been no improvement since really the pandemic craziness has ended. We would think we just ended this recession, this pandemic, we should start feeling more encouraged and optimistic about the economy. But that's not how Americans are feeling. It's worse. But once again, we see this interesting gap again. Remember how he said at high levels, big ambiguous things when he's talking about the economy, people are pretty pessimistic, but there's this consistent trend that I find over and over again, which is we're all bullish on home. We're all bullish on the communities that we live in. Now the trend is the same for the blue lines, but when Americans are asked about how their local economy is doing, it's consistently better. Consistently. Which has nothing to do with my presentation except to say that we root for the home team, right? Or whatever that looks like. Or it's an interesting trend that we always see that consistency. I'm going to sort of ask the question, is the economy as bad as we think it is? Is it really this bad? And before I really ask that question, we really should ask the question, are we a fair judge for how things look in the economy? Should I even be asking us is the survey results of if the economy is good or not even relevant? Because you guys might be really bad judges of how the economy is doing anyway. So we shouldn't care about your opinion. One example that might go into that a little bit is, has anybody in this room said in the last 4 years, God, nobody wants to work anymore? Has anybody said it? Okay, I saw one hand, one brave soul out there said it. Okay, there we go, okay. A lot of gray hairs were putting their hand up, I saw that. Okay, so this is a common thread that we heard throughout the pandemic, right? Nobody wants to work anymore. Unemployment's so high, why are there none of these people finding jobs, etc. You know what? Maybe some things are just generational, on repeat, Groundhog's Day. It just keeps happening over and over again. The most beautiful thread. Social media is the worst thing that's ever been created, but I found one glimmer of hope on Twitter, which was this thread that was an economic historian who looked back and found all of these beautiful clippings and newspaper clippings going back over 200 years. I didn't do 200 years of them. About how nobody wants to work anymore. You could also find, he did another thread on kids today, ... which is hilarious to see too. But just for those of you who can't see a few of them, some of my favorites. From 1979, quote, nobody wants to work anymore. That's the quote we all know. But the best is, instead of whoever it is, it's just disgusted businessmen. That's what it was attributed to, the quote. And then 1894 is the oldest one we have here, and I have to do my old-timey voice because it feels appropriate for 1894, but it is becoming apparent that nobody wants to work these hard times. Right? We've been saying things like this forever, and so maybe whatever we think about the economy is kind of irrelevant because we just kind of stink at it. We just kind of think things that aren't maybe accurate. So I don't know if that's true or not, but let's all go on a journey together and see how good at perceiving the economy we actually are. Is there really sort of a tornado has lifted the house and turned it upside down situation here? And I'll let you judge for yourselves at the end. Okay, so with that, we're going to talk about some data. You got to look at some graphs. You got to look at a lot of graphs. You got to look at 2 presenters talking about graphs. We'll be fast with these ones, though. Okay, I promise. Okay. This is Oregon's employment history going back to the early 2000s. So this is 23, 24 years-ish of almost a quarter century of employment history in the state of Oregon. The green line there represents the actual employment number. The white bars represent the year-over-year change in employment, so you can see the pace of growth. If we go to the very far right-hand side of the graph here, you can see Oregon has completely recovered from the pandemic shock, which was devastating. Devastating. We've never seen a shock quite like that. Some of it self-imposed, sure, but it was still a devastating shock with incredibly high rates of unemployment. We are fully recovered from that. And if we really pay attention to, it's really hard to tell any sort of trends on the far right side there, but if we look at the white bars, which gives us a perception about what the year-over-year change in employment looks like, you can see we're still growing. Do I have a laser here? Let's see if the laser works. We got a laser. We're still growing about 2-ish% a year, year over year, but that pace of growth is slowing. So our job growth is slowing. We've recovered from the pandemic. By the way, we would expect our job growth to be slowing at a time when we're at what I don't like to use the term full employment. There's no like sort of statistical hard and fast rule for what full employment looks like. But we are at near record low unemployment. So we don't have a ton of labor supply to be growing at 4% job base anyways. That's just not something we are capable of doing at this point because the labor supply doesn't exist to be growing there. So 2% growth year over year is actually kind of a sustainable rate that we can do when we account for the new labor that is coming into the labor force to fill the jobs that are being created right now. So to me, this is a story of slowing growth. We're still growing, but nothing to be too concerned about at this point. Sometimes people look at trends and they say, look at this downward slope in growth. Slow growth eventually turns into declines. I'll tell you what, that's not how statistics work. It may be true, we may actually start seeing declines. Maybe a recession happens a month from now, but at this point, we're not too concerned with the trend that we're seeing there. All right, let's compare what's happening at the state level to some of the regional stuff. I'm not going to touch Idaho at all because we have our Idaho guest in the room here who had to travel from very far distances to get here today. And the local guy here, you know, I want to make sure I don't step on his toes. So what if we look at, we're fast forwarding, same trend line, but we're starting with our trend in employment going back to just before the pandemic. I want to give us a little bit of a flavor for what we went through. I know some of us have PTSD, we don't want to remember it, so just ignore that big dip there, just look right past it, look on the right side of the graph. What you can see, so for us here in Mount Huron, we're the gray line, Eastern Oregon more broadly is the blue line. Few things to note here. Our shock from the pandemic significantly less than we saw in the rest of the state. That was sort of true of most rural communities. A variety of reasons behind that. The only exception was rural communities that were super hyper tourism based. So like the Oregon coast, for instance, got walloped. But out here, not nearly as much. We know how to socially distance in Eastern Oregon. We get to the far right side of the graph here. What's really fascinating is everyone looks pretty similar, right? And that's really important to note because during the last handful of recessions that we've had across the state of Oregon, our rural communities, particularly Eastern Oregon, has been like particularly hard hit and had really slow times, difficult times to recover from those. And this was an interesting switch where the shock wasn't nearly as bad and we're back on statewide trend. So that's a positive story for Eastern Oregon, for Mount Huron County, in a way that looks a lot different than what we've experienced, say, in 2008, for instance. That was much more devastating than this one. And there's a lot going on here. Don't read any of it. Look at my eyes. Look at my eyes. Okay, I see. Oh, some people are looking. Okay, what's going on here? I wanted to say, like, let's break this down by industries a little bit. We're talking about Mount Huron County, and we're looking at the change in employment that's occurred over the last dozen years or so. But there's something else that I'm trying to show here that's really more important. The blue bars here represent the actual change in employment over the last dozen years, and you can see what industries are growing and a handful of ones that are declining a little bit. Notable farm is one that's been struggling. We see a lot of declines there. Before I say anything else about the industry specifically, what are the orange bars? The orange bars represent how our industries don't move independent of that industry more broadly, right? So like what's going on in manufacturing here in Mount Huron County is affected by or connected to manufacturing across the nation, right? And so we want to know, how are the changes that we're seeing in this industry, how are they compared to what's going on at that same industry at the national level? So the orange bars are saying, if we assumed the growth rate or the declines at the national level, when we applied those to us locally, how are we different from those national trends? So if we're positive, if the orange bars are on the positive side here, it means that our industry has grown faster than the national trend. And if it is negative, if it's on the side of 0, the orange bars, it means that we've done worse than the national average for that industry. And what do you notice? We have a lot of orange bars on the right side of the graph. Our industries, whether they've been declining or growing over the last dozen years or so, most of them have done better. They've outperformed their same industry at the national level, which is not a story you often hear around here, I bet. That we've been outperforming the national numbers for a lot of these industries. Retail is one that stands out like a sore thumb up here. Really big. We really outperformed the nation. Remember, this is data over the last dozen years. I have a hunch what that retail number is from. Anyone else? I don't want to say it. Marijuana, there we go. I was like waiting for it. I think most of it is probably legalization of marijuana. It's probably a lot of the retail jump there. We have seen some more traditional retail grow as well. But what makes us stand out there, I think that big jump is marijuana. Once again, the timeline is a dozen years here. But you go through, and even some of our really crucial industries have really outperformed. We're talking about wholesale trade, for instance, which is really tied to agriculture in there, has outperformed the nation. And manufacturing has declined. So this is one that we really focus on in economic development. It's declined, but guess what? Our decline is not nearly as bad as what the national trend was. So once again, we're outperforming even when we're declining what the national trend is for these industries. Okay, so that's jobs. Let's switch gears really quickly and talk about the other side of the coin, which is people losing jobs, layoffs. If we look at the national trend or the Oregon trend for layoff activity, you tell me, so P.S. I cut the top of the graph off because this is the pandemic losses. If we have to cut it off, otherwise we can't see the real trends today. But for your context, if it wasn't cut off, the layoffs would be somewhere up there, okay? I don't know if you see the laser, it's up there. So we cut it off, just that's where it is. You tell me on the right-hand side of the graph here, are we really worried about that layoff activity? Not much going on there, okay? We are not seeing a huge uptick in layoffs. We don't have the same sort of data here at the local level for Malheur, but our friends at the Oregon Employment Department have access to unemployment insurance claims, initial claims for unemployment insurance, which presumably someone who's filing an unemployment insurance claims thinks they just got laid off. Most of them have been, okay? So we're going to use this as a proxy for some economic data here. And if we're looking at what's gone on here at Malheur, and the dotted line is our moving average because there is some volatility here. Guess what that volatility is called? Seasonality. We have a highly seasonal economy here locally, and so we have to cut out some of those peaks and valleys to get an idea what the trend is. Once again, we look at the data. That dotted line, are we concerned about layoff activity here in Malheur County? No, we're pretty low. We're still at some of the lowest levels of layoff activity we've seen in a long time. So the 5-week average we've seen through the beginning of the year was basically exactly the same as it was last year. Okay? Not too concerned about layoffs. If we want to talk about sort of a forward-looking indicator, how's the economy going to do in the future, one of the best ones we have for that is job ads. A job ad today is likely a job that were counted in payrolls 3 to 6 months down the road from now. And if this is one where people get a little bit nervous about. And if we're looking at job ad activity at the state level or at the national level, we've seen a consistent pattern where job ads are declining pretty aggressively. Guess where they're aggressively declining to, though, as far as volumes? They're basically landing on the level of job ad activity we were seeing before the pandemic, which was anyone super stressed in 2019 about the economy generally? It was through longest expansion in U.S. history, record low unemployment at that time. Things were pretty good then, and so our level of labor demand as measured by job ads today is kind of getting back to what was like a 2019 economy. So once again, this trend line could just continue to plummet downward and we could be a little more worried. But at this point, the volume that we're at today, not too concerning. Okay, so last big indicator we'll look at before we sort of figure out why we're so stressed out is wages. Because the amount of money that we make, the wages in our pockets, the discretionary spending that we have, that represents what we can do in the economy, how we can interact with it. And so when we actually look at wage activity, both at so Mal here is gray. I was really good at color coordinating, so I never change it. Mal here is gray, Oregon is green. No reflection on university alliances there at all. What we see is a really substantial period of strong wage growth, both at the state level and here also in Mount Airy County, when we looked from pre-pandemic to today. Now you see some softening. Real wages have declined. You know what that's from? Nominal wages haven't gone down. Employers aren't paying employees less. That's the inflation has eroded the purchasing power of those wages. But guess how much? It hasn't eroded it so much that it took back the wage gains that we saw during the pandemic. Today, here in Mount Airy County, the real wages in people's pockets, they're making 3% more after adjusting for inflation than they were in 2019 before the pandemic. So we have more disposable income from an income perspective than we had back then. So we shouldn't be too concerned from a wage front here, even though we've seen a little bit of erosion the last year there. So the question for us is this is great stuff, right? Life is good. No, that's not how you feel. And honestly, I wasn't saying a lot of great, happy words, but I wasn't saying a lot of negative, sad words either, right? So you probably don't feel life is good after looking at that economic data, but you also probably don't feel that's really terrible, right? But we, based on those survey responses, we do think the economy is pretty terrible. We do think things are pretty bad out there, pretty doom and gloom. So the question is, why are we so pessimistic about the economy when the labor market information actually looks pretty encouraging for our region and looks pretty good for the state? Pretty good is the wrong word. Looks pretty ho-hum, which is not bad, right? And there's a few reasons why that's the case. One of the reasons why we are pretty pessimistic about the economy is we just went through one of the largest inflation cycles that many of us have ever experienced as spenders in the economy. Not all of us, I see in the room. Some of us have seen inflation that periods that were pretty bad. The last one we saw, early 1980s, where we saw year-over-year inflation peak at over 14%. That is really high, and some of you nodding your head yep, I remember that, which is a sign of wisdom. Good job. Our inflationary cycle, though, was 8.5%. That is really unprecedented in most of our lifetimes. So this was a big bad feels, right? This was not a good experience to go through, to have tasted that inflationary cycle. Really quickly though, you notice the tail of the graph there, what's happened to the inflation? It's gone down, okay? Why has it gone down? That's beyond my pay grade. I'm not going to tell you exactly why, but the Federal Reserve would tell you that it's gone down because they raised interest rates. They have a toolbox, and their one job is to control inflation. And they want to be around 2% inflation. They got us pretty close. We're at 3% right now. The one tool in their toolbox is called the Fed fund rate. And that Fed fund rate is nothing to do with any of us in this room. Actually, there's a banker or two. It does have to do with bankers. It's really the rate at which banks borrow from one another. What does that have to do with us, and why would the Federal Reserve use this as a tool to address inflation? It's because that Fed fund rate trickles down to all of our other consumer loans that we would all engage with. Mortgage rates, car loans, credit cards, for instance. We all sort of will indirectly get affected by what the Fed fund rate does. So the Fed fund rate goes up dramatically. Here it is right here. This is actually the mortgage rates because you kind of all relate to that better. The Fed fund rate goes up. They raise the interest rates because inflation is really bad. Why would they do that? If interest rates go up, it's more costly to buy things, right? Guess what that does? It means you stop buying things, right? If it's more expensive to buy things, you stop buying things. And inflation at the root of it is always caused by too many dollars chasing too few goods, sort of a supply-demand mismatch that exists. So if the Federal Reserve says, we want to make it really expensive for you all to buy things, intentionally, and you stop buying things, it means the price of those goods will stop going through the roof because you have less competition for those things. And this trickles down to all the consumer loans that we have. So inflation felt bad, but guess what? The response, the antidote for inflation also feels bad to receive on the consumer end. So this is just an example. This is the mortgage interest rates, 30-year fixed rate mortgage rate. Many of us who might have been wanting to buy a house, get a different house, switch houses, whatever in the last year or so, have not been able to do that, have been feeling stuck in their personal situation because at an 8% interest rate at the current pricing of a lot of houses across the Pacific Northwest, it just doesn't pencil. You can't do it. You're locked out or locked in. Maybe you have a house and you feel like you can't give up your 2.75% mortgage interest rate that you have. Whatever it is, the response to these higher interest rates are working, we think. We think that's what's causing the inflation to go down, but it doesn't feel good either, right? I want to buy all the things. I want to go buy a new snowmobile, but I can't because credit card debt is just too expensive right now, or whatever it might be. And what that's translated to also is this response with higher interest rates has really boiled up into causing our housing affordability crisis to get that much worse. And this isn't to blame the Federal Reserve for our housing problems or our housing woes that exist not just here in Oregon, but exist with our friends across the river in Idaho and our friends across the other river in Washington. We all are dealing with housing affordability issues. And the interest rates on mortgages are a major factor in what affordability looks like. And for many years, our exorbitant housing prices were held in check by a low interest rate environment. We were able to get super low interest rate loans, and so the fact that the house price was really high relative to your wages was kind of okay. It sort of balanced itself a little bit. But that balancing act has really fallen over. And where we're sitting today, I mean, interest rates are no longer at 8% for mortgage interest rates, but banker in the room told me today, it's 7%, 6.8, whatever, still really high. And what that does is it just causes what it looks like for local wage earners. This is the key here when we talk about affordability indexes and why Idaho doesn't look great on here. Look at that, Idaho. The one thing you don't look good at. And I'm kidding. They're beautiful, aren't they? Local wage earners being able to afford local housing at the current interest rates. It looks really bad. We haven't seen any sort of erosion on this one yet, and we hope to soon. We can use some softening in the housing market. All right, so we have a couple of things that we've all been engaging. We all almost have these daily touch points with. Inflation we experience on a daily basis, whether it was going to the grocery store, really anywhere, vacations, whatever you want to do, inflation was touching it. And you had this high interest rate environment that was difficult, and all of us live someplace, so we've all sort of dealt with housing affordability issues to some extent or greater or lesser extent. These are all daily touch points that don't feel good. And so when people are asked how they feel about the economy, their brains go to those last three slides. They go through that inflation cycle, they go through what it looked like to have to say no to things, to have to constrain their spending. This never feels good, right? Even though you constraining your spending, you're fighting inflation. We're doing it together, people, all right? But either way, that solution doesn't feel good, right? And that overall has led to some pretty significant pessimism, even though the labor market information that we're seeing out there, the job market, the demand for labor out there looks pretty strong. It looks pretty good for most of the Pacific Northwest. So how would I actually frame what the economy looks like today? I call it the vacation hangover economy. Okay, so some context here. I've got two young ones. We have a third grader and a kindergartner, my wife and I. This year, so the kindergartner just started kindergarten this school year. This year we decided to take our vacation up at the family cabin in North Idaho on Priest Lake. We have a cabin that's been in our family for 4 generations. We always spend a bunch of August up there. This year we were like, we're going to go from our 2 weeks up there to 3 weeks. Big vacation, right? And not just 3 weeks. We're going to run that 3 weeks right up till the day before school starts. Okay? We're going to maximize vacation. Some of you are saying amateur hour here on the parenting front. We live and learn, okay? So we do 3 weeks of glorious Priest Lake. You know what I mean, a Priest Lake? It's the crown jewel is what Idahoans call it. You know, it's a beautiful place. You should go there sometime. Hanging out, boating, swimming, hiking, all the things, right? Good food, good drinks, gin and tonics, all the things. So we go from that, 3 weeks of it, up until the very next day, the kids get on the bus. Guess what time my kids get picked up on the bus? This is not a joke. It is Pacific time though, so some of you are like, oh, whatever. 6:38. 6:38. I live in the middle of a city. Like, it's not like they're busing them from like a farm or something, but 6:38. Hate school, school's the worst thing ever, I'd never want to go back, blah, blah, blah. We realized we made a mistake, okay? You don't take a 3-week vacation, then have no transition before the beginning of the school year. That's tough. That's a tough transition. Guess what we just went through? We went through a period. The pandemic, yes, was tough. But right after the pandemic, we had this period where everyone had cash in their pockets. We had so much discretionary spending. We had excess savings also because we weren't spending in the pandemic. Things felt really good. Also, the job market was insane. So much hiring because we were all spending money. This was like superheated economy. It was like fake life, right? Like vacation. Hanging out on Priest Lake is not, in the summertime, is not real life. Eventually winter would happen and it's not nearly as fun. So what happens is we have this really great time in the economy and it's very exciting. And then it felt like the rug got pulled out from us really quickly, where the inflation cycle came out of nowhere. And we got hit with this inflation and all these bad feels things in our mouth. Even though some of the underlying components of the economy were still okay, the things that we're engaging with on a daily basis didn't feel good. And that, my friends, is the vacation hangover economy. But guess what? Is school bad? Some people are like, yeah, school's bad, but not the TVCC folks. They're like, go to school. School's not bad. School's great. And you know what? Is it okay to say have to restrain your spending in the inflation in the face of inflation? Like, that's a good thing to probably do, and the right decision to be making. It still doesn't feel good though. And so even though these experiences don't feel good, it also doesn't mean it's doom and gloom out there. And there's no like underlying recession that is about to hit us, or that we're concerned is about to hit us in this moment, or that we're in at this moment. So with that, I want you all to take a deep breath. It's gonna be okay. The economy's not that bad. We're just back to school. So with that, thank you so much for your time today, everyone.
I don't know, Craig, are you ready to follow up on that?
I'm not sure, yeah.
It's kind of like the opening act, right? You're a little intimidated. Next, we'd like to welcome up Craig Shaul, a research supervisor with the Idaho Department of Labor.
Good morning and thank you. Very nice presentation, Damon. I'll just say ditto, and then that's it. So I anticipated that we might be running a little late at this point, so I'm ready to just give you overviews, basically. And I want to say that rather than just listen to me talk, although I kind of had a joke, because with the lectern, I kind of look like a professor probably. So I'm gonna, at the end of this, there'll be a quiz. So just pay attention, take notes. Anyway, so I would say that as we get my PowerPoint pulled up, that's the one, yes. So I want to say that since we just have a kind of, I'll keep the 15-20 minutes. If you have any questions, please bounce them off me right away. I kind of had, Damon was kind enough to send me the preview to his PowerPoint, so I kind of knew he was going to go through a lot of the things I probably would have covered anyway. So even though he ended on a positive note, I'm going to end it on a portent of doom note. So maybe we should reverse our order on that one. But I would also say that sorry, I lost my train of thought already. Oregon, and I would agree that what you experience on the ground, your local experience, like what we started with this morning, is the Treasure Valley. There's a western, eastern Idaho, these kind of invisible border that kind of divides us. So I would agree with that. And I mean, you have fourth generation. I have my grandfather grew up in Payette and was born in Letha. I just discovered that name just 2 years ago when I heard he had been born in Letha, and I'd driven by it many times going between Emmett and New Plymouth. My grandma they were in New Plymouth for a long, long time, so I would travel back and forth to New Plymouth as a young boy on 55 miles an hour road, if anyone remembers that. But it's really odd coming all the way from Boise at 5 o'clock in the morning, 5:30, and there's just so much traffic in between. I can't imagine that that's how much this area has changed. Does anyone here remember me from last time, 2 years ago? All right. I have a quiz for you. Also, I have a prize if you get the question right, but we'll get to that later. So So my portion of the presentation is just economic outlook, so I won't really get into the detail that Damon provided. He did a great job, and I would say that a lot of the nuances of Idaho's economy are pretty similar. There's going to be some differences, but I'm not going to get into the detail he did. I'm really going to keep it at the overall macro level for Idaho and kind of the U.S. and kind of get at why things feel bad a little bit. And I think being in my position, I'll just say I'm not really an economist. I just play one for the Idaho Department of Labor. But I would say that one of the challenges, my job isn't very easy. Last time I came here in 2022 was pretty good because our numbers bounced back from the pandemic. Before that, it was just every year, low unemployment, tight labor market, jobs are doing great. It doesn't get much harder, much easier than that. All of a sudden, things are starting to not feel as good. And trying to explain that, with inflation going up or down, jobs maintaining, but there's still this underlying current that there's a shoe to drop somewhere in the economy, right? And we just gone through the pandemic, so part of that's that. But anyway, so going forward, what I present to the legislature in terms of what we look like outlook, we just kind of provide our own little projection of the unemployment rate. It's really kind of we economists and us, we kind of expect 2024 to be a lot like 2022 or 2022 and 2023, kind of to maintain the forward momentum. Unemployment rate's probably going to go up a little bit just because there's that slowdown that Damon kind of mentioned. However, it's still going to be very low, and that's the tight labor market. So Idaho compared to the U.S. Last year, Idaho's total non-farm, which is basically the majority of the jobs, over the year was averaged about 3% year over year from one month to the next. So we would anticipate that once we get our benchmark here, once the revised numbers here later this month, that we'll probably see about 3% growth for Idaho year over year compared to the U.S., which was down to about 1.7 in December. So there is a slowdown in the nation in terms of job growth year to year, but Idaho seems to be kind of bucking that trend like it's kind of done. With the benchmark, like I mentioned, it might go down a little bit, but I would expect that we're probably going to still be around 3%, 2.5%. And this is kind of consistent for what Idaho's done in the last decade, since 2015. Sorry, I always get a little nervous at the start. It's basically because I have so much to talk about and I don't know how to organize it, but it's I don't know if anyone saw the cutting edge. It's give me 5 minutes, I'll be fine. All right, so, that's the wrong button there. All right, so you kind of saw this graph with Damon. He had a kind of divided by different regions for Oregon. I'm just doing states, and unfortunately, even though we're talking about borders and stuff, our labor market is divided by states, and so it's kind of the easiest way to kind of provide that information. Idaho, since the pandemic, we were the least affected state by pandemic in terms of job loss. We quickly recovered, and we've been basically trading places with Utah in terms of the most percentage growth of jobs since the pre-pandemic peak, which they moved it with some of the revisions they had. It's actually technically, I think, January now, but it was February for the longest time, so I'm stubbornly keeping into that. So if you're saying, hey, it's January, no, I'm just kind of being stubborn with my data. But in terms of the surrounding states, Idaho, Utah have been trading places between first and second. Nevada was the most affected state because of its tourism during the pandemic, but it's certainly had a rebound and is actually third right now in terms of total non-farm jobs. And then you kind of saw this graph a little with Damon. This is our expression of how, we call it a labor force tightness. It's something that Idaho's been dealing with. I would just, for those of you who are employers, is it challenging to find workers? Challenging to keep workers? I'm seeing a lot of shaking. Yes, okay. That's what we've been experiencing for the last 10 years, and we're expecting that to continue. During that kind of hangover period that Damon talked about, our job, the ratio of open jobs to unemployed people was up to 3 for Idaho. It's down to 1.1, which, like Damon said, is back to our pre-pandemic level, which was still very difficult for employers in Idaho to find workers. So you're probably, in terms of economic outlook, is that going to change? All right, this is the test. For those that were here 2 years ago, does anyone remember who this guy was? This is where I go into portent to doom. But it's with this is Reverend Thomas Malthus. If you remember, he's the guy back in the 17th, 18th century. He predicted that he was basically looking at population growth, run that again. Population growth for the English countryside, England, and noticing that it was growing exponentially, but the production of food was growing arithmetically, which basically means, as you square, like a family of 4 is multiplied by 4, multiplied by 4, multiplied by 16, 32. That's exponential. Multiplication is 4 times 2 times 2 times 2. That's just arithmetic. So there's going to be a difference at some point where the resource production is going not to keep up with the population. And he was predicting that right there was going to be a catastrophe moment. Catastrophe moment where there would be unemployment, there'd be starvation, those types of things. And this was in 1790s, early 1800s. Does anyone remember that if there was a great UK English famine in the 18th, 19th century? There wasn't one. So he was wrong. And the reason he was wrong is because he just basically was estimating something in terms of this arithmetic food production. He wasn't anticipating technological progress. And at the time, to his credit, I mean, how would you? But since then, we've had difference in farm technology, agriculture methods that basically kind of changed that. So there really wasn't in addition, I would say Britain had a huge empire that they pull resources from, but there wasn't this catastrophe that Malthus was anticipating. So I would just say as we're going forward, what I'm going to kind of give you a glimpse in terms of what the data and some of the estimates are going to provide. Malthus is kind of like the harbinger a little bit, just like take it with a grain of salt, because we're looking at kind of long-term figures, and it might be that things change, but at the same time, from our standpoint and from what the data shows, that basically the labor force challenge that the U.S. is facing in Idaho and eastern Oregon, it's going to remain consistent for the foreseeable future. And when I say foreseeable future, long after I've retired, I'm probably dead. And I'll get to that why in a second here. So this labor force difference, or this labor market challenge in terms of labor force tightness, there's always going to be that as long as the economy is doing well. And that even if you add population to your borders, that new population is still consuming goods and services, even if they're working. And Idaho's had the good fortune of having very large in-migration, and a large portion of that's joining the labor force. But there's obviously some aspect of that that's retired. But even for those that are working, they're still consuming services, and so the support around those new people in terms of retail, different kinds of service jobs also has to increase. And so there's always going to be this divergence between demand for service jobs or demand for jobs in general and the ability for the labor force to fill it. And Idaho's been lucky that the population growth has been what has been the difference for us to fill that. So, actually skip forward to this one here. So the most recent census population projections for the 2023, it goes from July to July, was 1.3 for Idaho. We'll go back and I'll show you Oregon's here in a second. You're welcome. So in these two lines here, we have the U.S. and Idaho. If you notice, the U.S. population growth is at 0.5, so we've kind of been struggling at kind of very low, I shouldn't say struggling, but the demographics of the U.S., the population has been growing very slowly. Before 0.5 is 0.4, but Idaho has been lucky. Last year was 1.3, which was down from 1.8 the year before, which was down from 2.9, 3.4 during the pandemic. So during the pandemic, when everyone was displacing, a lot of them decided to move to Idaho. Our population growth skyrocketed along with our housing prices. But I would say that without immigration, and I'll get to a slide here for that in a second, Idaho's population growth would be matching the U.S. So just in terms of births over deaths, we'd be at 0.5. And honestly, the job growth numbers I showed you before, without that immigration, we would probably be seeing lower, assuredly we'd be seeing lower job growth. Going back, I didn't produce this just for you, Damon, just so you know. This is something I do for the legislature each year, just to provide who the top states are, how Idaho ranks in that, and then the surrounding states. So Oregon, and to be fair, California had a larger percentage growth or decline, but at a 0.1% decline in population is basically no change. So I would say it's a decline. But although I would say that I have a team of labor economists from around the state, all the way up Post Falls, Coeur d'Alene, and all the way over to Idaho Falls and Pocatello. And one of the things that we're kind of hearing more of is as even though Idaho's population is increasing, our housing costs are kind of skyrocketing. It's actually pushing out long-time residents and forcing them to go find other places where the housing is more affordable. So there's kind of this displacement that's kind of happening as we're seeing this play out. Any questions? My other joke was, I always have this joke where my talks are always in the morning like this or right after lunch, so my challenge is to keep people from falling asleep. It's the first time I've had to come on after another economist with no more graphs, so I don't think I'm doing a good job at that. All right, so post-pandemic labor force. This is from Sam Wolkenhauer up north. This is for the nation, but you can apply it to basically Idaho or any state. Post-pandemic labor force, like Damon was kind of referring to, is that during the pandemic, everything kind of dropped off, nothing was moving. We've slowly come back up to that, and it's been growing again. So the nation's actually been seeing an increase in labor force, but most of that is due to in-migration. Again, immigration is what's kind of pulling that up. If without it, that 0.5 population increase, and obviously that's 0.5 is for 18 years from now, or 16 before they get counted in the workforce. But it's without that, the U.S. labor force growth would probably be kind of stale, to be honest. One thing that you might, does anyone here like pay attention to economic news that comes out? And then you might have seen some headlines about productivity going down, and so it's like a big alarm because no one's working. Like those the blurbs that Damon had in terms of there's no one wants to work anymore, which is kind of interesting. Although I really do think we have a worker shortage now, I think things are a little bit different. But the productivity has been going back up. And really what was causing that decline, if anyone notices that there's this huge uptick during the pandemic, which seems counterintuitive. Anyone care to guess why there's that huge increase in 2020 when everyone was kind of laid off? Someone raise their hand. Go ahead.
Essential workers?
Essential workers, right. So in other words, only those people that were working and employed were counted as working at that point and productive. So so basically the entire service sector, as it was out of the labor market and because of the pandemic, they weren't really being counted in this. And so it's kind of a false increase. So it's just in terms of the percentage of people employed, what they're doing went up because a lot of the population wasn't even being considered at that point. As those service sectors have come back, that's where you see that decline happen. So it wasn't necessarily that productivity is falling because people are being more lazy. It's just that the leisure and the hospitality restaurant where you're adding more people to that denominator and that calculation are starting to affect it and pulling it down. So that's why it's come down, but it's since come back up. So if you remember Malthus, he was talking about productivity, and people, that productivity going up with fewer people is a good thing. So I think I skipped past the participation rate, which one of the challenges and why we have a tight labor market is there's just a lot more people that are retired than we used to have. Our peak participation rate for the U.S. and for Idaho, I'm guessing most states, is kind of in the late 1990s, 2000s. And that's when all the baby boomers were before they hit retirement age. We had a huge increase as women were joining the labor force, and then that kind of reached that peak point. And then as the baby boomers started to retire, they started to, that participation rate started to fall. Right now, Idaho's at 62.5, kind of in line with the US, and both are kind of at its lowest point since the early 1970s. but most of that is due to retirees. It's not people that are unemployed, not looking for work, or it's not just people, they're just kind of on the dole, so to say. These are people that have retired and earned their twilight years, leisure type of thing. So in addition, there is an increase of younger cohort going to school longer, so there's kind of this squeeze a little bit at both ends, but that's not as much as the retirees. So this is the portent to doom bit. So, and this is why I'm saying, remember Malthus and what I was saying before, in terms of when you have these long-term economic projections, there's a lot of things that can happen in the middle. So one of the reasons that we're also having a demographic crunch and the population growth is kind of really at its lower level than it has been historically, is that the replacement rate for women fertility is below the replacement threshold to keep the population at a level, to keep it static, basically. And the demographers, economists have figured out 2.1% fertility, or 2.1 fertility is basically the rate you need to keep that population static. Anything below that, and you're looking at a long-term population decline. Anything above, you're looking at an increase. So we've been below that for quite some time. And so the idea, and this is the US, but if you look at global fertility rates over the last few decades, this is a long-term thing that the globe is facing. And actually, when I say facing, it's a challenge, and it's not something that, I put this up there realizing that a simple solution is like, well, we just need to increase fertility rates. Well, that's not really what I'm saying either. I just want to be clear about that. Because, I would say for some of these countries that have tried to do that, you basically have to do one of two things. Well, two things and do both of them. You have to increase payments to families for them to have children, and women specifically. But you also have to anticipate that women are going to have to be out of the labor force. And frankly, globally, that's not the choice that people are making, and that puts us kind of turns the clock back to something that I don't think is ethically sound to do. But really, what this is pointing at is going forward. For those of us that like I'm going to be looking at, if I'm lucky, a retirement into the 2040s and 50s. The service sector that's going to see reporting on, it's going to be getting smaller and smaller in terms of the proportion of the population. So this labor market tightness is going to be something that's around for a long time. And in fact, globally, population by some, there's a couple estimates out there, and most long-term range forecasts agree that mid-century, 21st century, the globe starts to see a population decline around 2050. So in different countries at different points in that. So I would say that the US, even though we are at a lower replacement rate and our population growth is lower, we still have an advantage globally in that our immigration is still an attraction for, we basically would win if it was a race to get the working age population globally, we would certainly be ahead in that game. So a lot of other countries that are looking at the decline, I would point out to China, to 1.2, that attraction for foreign labor force or immigration would be a little bit more challenging. So, so this is not going away anytime soon, so that's really kind of my end point. Sorry about that. I knew I was going to be kind of just winging this here at the end, so are there any questions? I would say happy Leap Day, by the way. Anyway, I had some kind of fun facts about that, but I see we're kind of over time, so I'll just stop there and ask if anyone has any questions. All right, well, thank you for the invite.
Thank you, Craig, and we appreciate you taking the time out and traveling such a far distance. Poor Damon was the local guy and got the quick commute, but we appreciate you taking the time to cross the border this morning and come out and spend some time with us. Actually, I want to take a moment and if we could, do another round of applause for all of our speakers this morning. dynamic information. And we certainly appreciate you taking the time out of your day to come out and spend it with us here in the Treasure Valley and here at TVCC. Before we do the drawing for the gift baskets here, I want to take just a moment and remind everybody that the reason that we're here is not only to learn about the economy in our states and the economy in the Treasure Valley and the region that SRETA serves, but it's also an opportunity for SRETA to do a reach out to the communities and to the business leaders in those communities. Snake River Economic Development Alliance was started a number of years ago as a way to bring multiple counties, multiple cities, and 2 states together to work for a common goal. And that common goal is the economic development of this region. Something that trickles down to each and every person that sits in this room today, and to all of your vendors and all of your contacts and everyone else. We are not successful if you are not successful, and that is why we do what we do on a daily basis as Kristen works on a constant basis in order to try to not only attract new business, but one of the other things that we work very hard on is business retention and expansion as well. So we've worked with a lot of companies in the region in order to help them either stay in business here in the Treasure Valley and in our area to keep us economically viable, but also to help those companies expand. So, and I'm saying that for a lot of reasons. One, I want to give Kristen a big shout out, of course, for all of the work that she does on a daily basis. There is no way that the board could ever do what she does, and we appreciate everything that she does in order for the economic vitality of this region. But also, the only way that SRETA can help continue to expand and work on our goals and to bring in new companies and to continue with those expansions and those business retentions is through financial assistance, through our communities, through our cities, through our county partnerships, and then also, of course, through our private partnerships as well, too. So if your business is not currently a member of SRETA paying dues, we would certainly appreciate you doing so. And if you have any questions on that, feel free to ask. We're more than happy to help. But of course, again, that brochure is provided for you conveniently right in the center of your table. And I'll be around to pick up checks at the end. And then I also want to give a shout out to Alex with Living in the News, who's been here recording the entire presentation this morning. Thank you, Alex, and thank you for sponsoring one of the baskets this morning as well, too. But that being said, obviously, because he's been recording, this entire presentation will be available too in case you need portions or parts of or want to share that with others. We would appreciate that. And all you have to do is reach out to Alex at livinginthenews.com and he'll be happy to share that with you. So, anything else, Kristen? Other than giving away good stuff? Okay. Can I have my lovely assistant, please? Thank you. Cayman's going to have lots of duties here very soon at State Convention. You're headed to Bend too, aren't you? Portland. Oh, sorry. I tried. Yeah, trust me. We know. Oh yeah, you're picking. Oh yeah, you're picking. Tobin Dixon, come on up and pick your basket. Because I just realized I skipped a part of the program. So let's see, go ahead and draw the next card while I do this. So on behalf of SRETA, Kate, thank you very much for taking time out of your day and traveling over to... And our next winner is Ken Hart. Where's Ken? There's Ken. As Ken makes his way up, I'll say thank you to Damon as well. Thank you, sir. We'll sweeten the ride back. Anything from the table there, sir? And thank you, Craig, as well. Appreciate it very much. That'll look good at the next board meeting. from one of our friends at St. Luke's, Dawn. Eeny, meeny, miny, mo. Go ahead and draw the next one while Dawn's picking. She dug deep.
I did.
Chad Evers. Where's Chad? There he is. While Chad makes his way up, we also have a thank you to the associated students of Treasure Valley Community College for all their hard work in helping to put on the event and do that. So is there someone here?
I'll take it down to him.
You want to take it down to him? Probably. And thank you to Travis for all of your work with the audio visual and putting together the room and really being a key part of putting this whole thing together starting a year ago when we elected to come here to TVCC and do it here. So thank you, Travis. Appreciate that. Go ahead. We have 2 left. Supposedly leap day is a very lucky day too. I was listening to the radio this morning. They were telling me to go out and buy lottery tickets today. I think they're in cahoots with the Idaho Lottery Commission, but it's you. It's you. There you go. Congratulations, Damon. Look at how deep she dug. There you go. Okay, go ahead and draw one more, 2, and then you can grab yours, right? She's got to have some to take to state convention with her. Okay. Oh, I know who that is without even looking. Dick Brotherton. Congratulations, Dick. Again, thank you everyone for coming out this morning. We appreciate you taking the time to be engaged in economic development in our region. We especially appreciate seeing so many new faces in the room this morning. Thank you for coming out. Feel free to network a little bit if you would like afterwards. Have a great day. Happy Leap Day. And have a great 2024. Thank you, everyone.